Good morning and welcome to the Montana LTAP monthly webinar series. Today's presentation, Safe System Approach for Rural Road Regions, will be presented by special guest Jamie Sullivan. Jamie Sullivan is the director of the National Center for Rural Road Safety, chair of the TRB Rural Transportation Issues Coordinating Council, manager of the Public Lands Transportation Fellows Program, senior research engineer with the Western Transportation Institute at Montana State University. Please take a moment to answer the poll question to the, it's actually to the right instead of the left, and type any questions you may have directly into the chat pod. And this meeting is being recorded. And with that, Jamie, I'm going to let you take over.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who's joining us today. I appreciate you being here. As Autumn just mentioned, I am the director for the National Center for Rural Road Safety. In case you haven't heard of us, we've been around for about 8 years. We are a center of excellence funded by the Federal Highway Administration with all of those partners that you can see over on the left-hand side making up the center. We do monthly webinars on rural road safety. We have social media, which you can find at the very end of our of this webinar today, how to get onto Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn to follow us. We also do a Safety Sidekick newsletter, as well as have a newsroom on our website. We provide bi-weekly training e-blasts that talk about all of the different safety trainings from all across the country and all different organizations that are available in the upcoming weeks that you can sign up for. And then we also have rural road safety summits that we host every 2 to 3 years. And our next one will be held in September of 2023 in Oklahoma City. And then we do an annual Rural Road Safety Awareness Week, which happens the third week in July every year. And we also have launched a Road Safety Champion program, which is a Safety 101 type course that provides a certificate type program that helps build safety champions in your agencies. And you can sign up for all of this and to get all of our emails on our homepage, which is ruralsafetycenter.org, if you're interested in learning more. So today we're going to talk about the safe system approach. And first, I like to start with the fact that we all really want to get to zero deaths in our country on roadways. Right now, there's way too many that happen every year. We have about 38,824 deaths per year in the country. That number is from 2020. In Montana itself, there were 240 fatalities in 2021. And so far this year in 2022, there have been 190. So that's 190 people in the state that didn't make it home when they needed to. And it's really important that we get that number to zero, because every fatality that we have is someone's family and friend and someone's most important person. So we all need to do our parts and do everything we can to really strive for that goal of zero. And so how do we do that? We can do that using this framework called the Safe System Approach that I'm going to talk about today. And we also need to have a foundation in our organizations and in our country with road users of a positive traffic safety culture. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too. And when we liken these three things together, we can talk about it as though a good example is a sailboat trying to get to an ocean, to an island. In our case, the island would be our goal of zero. And our sailboat is going to be the safe system approach. That's how we're going to get there. But we can't do it without wind. And that wind is our traffic safety culture, and really making sure that we work on that as well. And so we'll go through each of these pieces. And why is it important, and why have we been hearing this term safe system approach more recently, and we've been hearing a lot about it? Well, this is because it's been done for quite a while internationally. And they're really finding that this approach is working, and it's helping international countries go towards that goal of zero. And so it's something that the United States has started to implement as well, knowing that it's working, and it's something that we can help get to our goal of zero. We found that last year in January of 2022, this National Roadway Safety Strategy was released by the US DOT, and they talk about this crisis on our roadway and how it's unacceptable and preventable, and we really need to reach that goal of zero long term. And so it also talks about US DOT's top priority being safety. And again, how they believe this should be done is through adopting the safe system approach. And so if you're interested, you can find this National Roadway Safety Strategy online. The very end of my webinar presentation will have a link for where you can find this. But you can read more there about what US DOT is doing to try and reach this goal of zero and use the safe system approach. But so what is the safe system approach? It's this circle that we see over on the right, and we're going to go through each of these pieces individually just to give you a little bit more information about what they are and how it really impacts you and what you can do to impact these pieces as well. So the safe system approach is a different way to think about roadway safety. And in a minute, we'll talk a little bit about how we've traditionally talked about it and now what we're moving towards in this safe system approach. But it's really holistic. It's meaning that we're going to look at this entire system together and not just one piece or another. We really need to look at it as an intertwining part of all of these elements and principles that exist. And redundancy is really key as well when we start looking at this as a holistic approach. We're trying to eliminate fatal and serious injuries for all road users, not just for drivers. We need to accommodate human mistakes. In the past, we've tended to think that we could change some of these mistakes and some of these behaviors, and now we're really knowing that we can't necessarily change all of them, but we can design to accommodate some of those mistakes that occur. And most importantly, we need to keep the impacts of the human body at tolerable levels. Our body can only take so much before fatalities will happen. And so we'll talk a little bit about how that works as well. So when we start looking at this, the traditional approach versus the safe system approach, some of the things we can see that we're doing differently. Previously, we used to try and prevent crashes. Now we're trying to eliminate those fatal and serious injuries. So we're shifting our priority a little bit. We're not saying, obviously we want to prevent all crashes if we can, but the most important ones that we want to look at is those fatalities and serious injuries, and really put our priorities there. Instead of trying to improve human behavior, now we're going to design for those human mistakes and limitations that I talked about. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of these human mistakes that occur and how we can do that. Instead of traditionally doing only speed management, now we're looking at how to reduce system kinetic energy. And we'll talk about what the definition of kinetic energy is and how that's different from just looking at speed. We used to say individuals were responsible for this in the traditional approach for the crashes that were occurring. And now we know it's really a shared responsibility. There's things that all of us can do to help prevent these fatalities, not just a driver. And then we also used to look more at high crash locations and reactively applying countermeasures. And now we want to look at these proactively and really do a systemic approach where we know that if there's a particular location that has certain risk features, and another location in our county or area has those as well, it's just a matter of time before a crash is likely to occur at that as well. And so we need to systemically apply these countermeasures. Perhaps it's a horizontal curve where you have several of them in your county that look identical and crashes have only occurred at one of them. When you're putting countermeasures in there to make that curve safer, you want to do it at the other ones that look identical to it as well and have those same risk features to proactively make sure that no crash is going to occur there. And then traditionally, we've really looked at transportation as the key to move efficiently. We wanted to get people as fast as we could from point A to point B. We wanted to move goods and services. And now in the safe system approach, we really want to look at it as safe mobility. So we do want people to get there and be able to move between point A and point B, but we want to make sure that they're doing that in a safe manner versus really looking at that for efficiencies only. So when we start looking at this safe system approach and digging into each of these pieces, we're going to look at it from two different perspectives. Around the outside of this circle, there are 6 principles, and those we'll go into again individually and talk about each of these, but they're the pieces that really make the safe system work. And then in the center, we see each of these elements, and these are where we can start putting some of the principles to place in each of these pieces. And you'll see that there's different people that tend to be responsible for each of these elements, but we can all work together to make sure that they are working in a holistic way. So the six safe system principles that we'll go through. The first is that death and serious injury is unacceptable. This is where we talk about our vision zero and really making sure that we're getting to zero there. Humans make mistakes. Humans are vulnerable. Responsibility is shared. Safety is proactive, and redundancy is crucial. And again, we're going to go through each of these. So for humans make mistakes, we really need to look about applying human factors when we're talking about redesigning roadways, when we're talking about some of the maintenance perspective that we do, and some of the things that we do when we're maintaining roadways, such as the retroreflectivity of our signs and our pavement markings, cutting back some of the foliage that's covering our signs and taking away some of those cues that we're trying to give to the road users. So the system owners and operators should strive to make it easy for humans to not make mistakes by designing roads and vehicles to be in tune with human competencies. And what we know is that not all drivers are the same. Our capability as a driver or a road user is really our competence plus our human factors variables. And our competence are those things that we're born with, those abilities that we have, as well as our life experiences. So we see that as you get older, you have more life experiences and your capability improves. But then we also see other things like those innate abilities. As you get older, some of those tend to degrade. So your eyesight tends to degrade, your reaction time tends to degrade. So really, when we're looking at human factors, we're looking at those youngest drivers have less life experiences, and those older drivers, their innate abilities that they're born with are starting to degrade. So we're going to look at both of those sides of the spectrum as we're trying to design things. We also then know those human factor variables are attitudes and behaviors. Those pieces such as thinking that it's okay to drive a certain amount of speed over the speed limit, or making the decision to get behind a wheel when you have had too much to drink. And so all of those pieces are things that we can consider. We also know when we're starting to look at those human factor variables that there's an important piece of looking at what expectancies are for the human. We all expect certain things as we're driving or using a road. And so when things do not go as we are expecting or what we've seen in the past, then that's where issues can exist. So such as driving that curve. If all of the curves that you've ever driven are very well marked, have the signs and the markings, and all of a sudden you come up against one that is not the way that you've seen in the past, that's when drivers and road users tend to make errors. And so that's why we want to make sure that everything that we can is as expected and that it is consistent. We also know that humans are vulnerable, as we talked about before. So your body has a limited physical ability to tolerate a crash force before harm occurs. This is where things such as our seatbelts and our airbags are really important to try and keep those forces down so that you don't have as big of a risk for fatalities. So we also can use some of our ways that we operate and manage the roadways to also prevent those forces. And we can design safer roads that will help manage this kinetic energy. So kinetic energy, we talked a little bit about the difference between that and speed. Kinetic energy is this formula over on the right-hand side. So it's 1/2 mass times velocity squared, where velocity is a vector of speed and direction. So we're really, every time we talk about this, the mass of a car is really important. So those bigger cars, there's going to be more kinetic energy. Also, as speed goes up, we know that's an issue. And then for the vector piece, the velocity piece, and direction, we know that such as head-on collisions are much more dangerous than some of the other directions that you can be hit. So a good example of one way to affect this is roundabouts, which I know you have a lot of in Montana. They're beginning to be put in a lot. So by putting in a roundabout, not only are we decreasing speed, but we're also taking away some of those angles of potential impact of so as opposed to a typical intersection where you could have those T-bone crashes or head-on crashes. Now with a roundabout, the crash that's most common is going to be hitting the back end of a vehicle. So you've now brought your direction down and your speed down. So the risk of a fatality in a roundabout is significantly less than a traditional intersection. We also want to create a more forgiving road system and know that the responsibility is really shared between everyone. So this is not just road users, but also managers of a road, maintenance staff, designers. We can all impact the road system and how it's forgiving. Vehicle manufacturers, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, post-crash care we'll also go into, and then law enforcement as they help us enforce some of those laws and the behavioral side of things as well. We also know that safety needs to be proactive, which I talked a little bit about when we were talking about the horizontal curve. So some of the things that we can put into place in our holistic approach for processes include that systemic safety analysis where we're looking at our data and applying those countermeasures all across our county. We can also do things such as road safety audits, create local road safety plans. Again, I know that you have those in Montana. And then also have safety coalitions where we can work with our partners in law enforcement and public health to make sure that not only are we implementing some of these countermeasures, but that we're also enforcing them and that we're educating the road users as to why they're important and why we put them in place. Some references and resources for you are listed here, and they'll be at the end of the presentation as well. So there's a do-it-yourself site on how to create a local road safety plan and implement some of those pieces. There's a new guide on growing traffic safety culture, which talks about some experiences from rural communities on how they've done this and put into place some of the rural safety approaches. And then there's also a video that was released by FHWA that discusses the 3 different approaches to safety, which are all important. And that's the site-specific, systematic, and systemic, and how those are different and what they mean. So then we also talked about redundancy being crucial as well. And so the Swiss cheese model is a great way to explain this and to understand it. When we start talking about our 5 elements in the safe system approach, which we're going to go through here in just a few minutes, we know that if we are applying countermeasures or putting in some of those solutions into only one piece of this, there's a chance that that if that fails, there's no other safety net per se in the other elements. And so that's why it really needs to be a holistic approach. The more safety features we can put into these different pieces, the better chance we have of a fatality not occurring. So we could talk about an example, again, of that horizontal curve if we wanted to use that. So in a horizontal curve, perhaps we've got an advisory speed there, and maybe our road user is not paying attention and decides that they are not going to drop their speed. So right there, we've had a human error in our safe road user piece. They're not traveling the advisory speed. So then our next element would be the safe vehicles, how we can still hopefully keep them safe on that curve. Perhaps they, because they're going faster than they should, they start to drift over one of the edge lines. Their vehicle may have safety features in place that is going to let them know that they're about to have a roadway departure, and it's going to alert them somehow. So perhaps that has now corrected them and they're safe and no fatality will occur because of that safe vehicle piece. But perhaps they're driving in an older vehicle that does not have those safety features. So now we've failed in that safe vehicle piece too. We've already gone through the safe speed piece. They've chosen not to drive the safe speed, or perhaps that advisory speed still was too fast. Maybe even if they did decide to go that advisory speed, then it should have actually been decreased from that. Perhaps that's another failure. So then on our safe roads piece, we're hopeful that there are chevrons out there, that the retroreflectivity is working on those chevrons, that perhaps There's wider edge lines that are there, letting someone know that they should be going a different speed as well, and that the pavement or the retroreflectivity is working for them. Perhaps there are rumble strips as well to alert them because their vehicle wasn't up to, had those safety features. So again, perhaps we've saved them at that piece on the safe road. And if not, maybe this is on an unpaved road and it doesn't have some of those features and they are continuing off the road. Another example could be a clear zone where they did run off the road but did not hit anything. And then the last piece in this would be our post-crash care piece. And hopefully at this point in the curve, they are in an area that has great cell service and we can get to post-crash care, or that there's enough people going around on this roadway that our EMS could be called, and perhaps our law enforcement has all been trained in traffic incident management as well and can get there very fast and take care of the crash. So each of these pieces is really important if we have multiples in here to help people. So then we have these 5 elements in the center that I talked about. And again, we'll go through each of these in particular. So we have the safe road user element. And this is not just the attitudes and behaviors of the safe road user, but there's also things that we can do as engineers and planners and maintenance and construction to help with these as well. And those include making sure that our roads are designed for all road users, using things such as the complete streets techniques, making sure that we try to separate our road users either by time or space. So making sure that those road users who are using perhaps biking or walking or have disabilities are given their own portions of the roadway that they can use as well. And there's some resources here that, again, that are available. There's a small town and rural multimodal networks guide that talks about some of those separations in time and space for rural areas. When we're talking about road users and agricultural vehicles, which again, there are a lot of in Montana, there's a website called Find Me Driving, which has some great public awareness campaigns that can be used for slow moving vehicles. For tribal areas in Montana, there's some great examples from Washington State of how they have worked on their public awareness campaigns for tribal areas. And then again, I mentioned this traffic safety culture document that exists. For safe vehicles, this is one where as engineers and planners and maintenance staff, we have less ability to implement or affect this piece of it. This is more on the vehicle manufacturer side, but there are still some pieces that we can do here. There is a study that's been done on older drivers as well that's important for us to know that in rural areas, especially, our older drivers tend to have older and smaller vehicles, meaning that they have less of the newer safety features in them. So that's something that we have to be aware of and take into account when we're looking at putting in some of these safety features and talking about kinetic energy, and knowing also that our older drivers are more frail. And it's important when we're looking at that kinetic energy, especially for them, that their risk of fatalities are already increased because of those pieces. And then we can also consider putting some of these safe vehicle pieces into our own fleets. So there are the connected and automated type technologies and some of these safety features that aren't even connected and automated that reduce the crash risk and the chances of crashes, and then have proactive systems when crashes do occur. So when we're looking to put new trucks into our own fleet, considering which of these safety pieces we're going to look into and have and buy as well. The safe system or the safe speed element, this one is not about universally reducing speeds, but as we talked about before, it's really about designing to meet user expectancies, making sure that we are having these self-explaining roads that it makes sense to a road user what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it, and then self-enforcing roads as well. Where it makes them go slower speeds based on the roadway. So some roads, as you can see on that top right, are engineered to accommodate higher speeds, those ones that are flat and wide and have really great shoulders. And then some aren't. And those are those ones that are hilly and have no shoulders and are not quite as wide. And then those ones that go through Main Street, where we know that there's going to be a lot more pedestrian and bicycle activity. And we put in those crosswalks to really enforce to people and explain what the road user mix is of these roads. So we need to make sure that we're designing these to meet those expectancies of a road user. We also need to make sure that our speeds are appropriate to what road conditions we have, whether this be the road users who are using the roads, whether it be the fact that we have curves or unpaved roads, so what our road mix or what our road is made up of. But then also those ones where we have a lot of tourists in our areas, especially in Montana. And then the weather as well is an important factor. So speeds need to decrease when we have the bad weather as well. The next one, here are just some resources for you on safe speed element and some countermeasures that can be used. So we have the speed feedback signs, we have variable speed limits, roundabouts as we talked about before, and then there are some resources on noteworthy speed management practices as well. For the safe road element, this is going to be a continuum. It's not an absolute. It's something that we're going to have to continuously work towards and continuously change because the design and operation of our roads can also change. So we need to make sure that we're updating the safety countermeasures that we put into place as the design and operation of our roads change too. So it needs to be appropriate for our intended and actual use and speed of the environment. We're trying to reduce really that risk of error for people and then manage those crash levels to tolerable levels to avoid those severe outcomes such as fatalities. And we can do this by using our proven countermeasures that Federal Highway has. NHTSA also has those countermeasures that work on the behavioral side. And then Road to Zero has put together a website on doubling down on what works. We also have the Focus on Reducing Rural Roadway Departures group, who has put together several guides that help with the rural roadway departures as well. And then that last piece that we talked about is that post-crash care element. The golden hour is very important to make sure that we can get to people in that first hour after a crash occurs. And that's really where the risk of a fatality goes down, is if we can get to them. So it's really important that we do things such as take those traffic incident management trainings that exist. And there's a new one that's going to be coming out for rural here within the next couple of months. So I hope that you'll all explore that when it is available through Federal Highway Administration. So just to wrap up, our safe system, to create that, we need to minimize our instances of conflicts for all road users, not just the drivers. Make sure we're increasing attentiveness and awareness of road users, separating our users in space and in time, managing those impact angles, the energy distribution, and the speed. Make sure that we have forgiving roadways and roadsides relative to that speed environment. So if you do have a roadway departure, making sure that we have a clear zone and that we have barriers up for things that could be hit, or have the posts that can break away, making sure that we're designing based on users' expectancies and then creating those redundancies. If you guys don't have a local road safety plan already in your county, you can consider applying for the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. A new opening for this should come up in the next year. And if you do already have a local road safety plan, then you could apply for an implementation grant in this SS4A to get funding to apply some of those countermeasures, assuming that you meet all of the requirements. And the website for doing so is shown on your screen. So again, I provided all of the resources for exploring a safe system journey. And here you'll find my contact information if you have any questions and would like to reach out and get more resources. Also our social media and our website, ruralsafetycenter.org. And if you are interested in learning more about any of the things we talked about today, I would encourage you to sign up for our Road Safety Champion program. That certificate program has several several different modules that go into more detail than I was able to today. They're 2-hour courses. And again, you can email me if you're interested, and we'll put you on the distribution list for that. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Jamie. And it doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat pod. So with that, are you supposed to get the cold over there, Jamie?
I don't know.
Oh. We're looking at like in the like 40 below here coming up.
Oh, wow. Yeah, definitely not that cold.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not.
Yeah. Yes.
So all
So,
of you
well, thank
stay
you
warm,
again. Oh,
please. Please stay
yes.
warm.
Well, thank you, Jamie, and thank you for those who joined us today. And as Jamie said, stay warm, and we will see you in the new year. Thank you.